Hey folks, today we are going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called So Dead, and it's from Lone Knight Games. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page. You can do that by following the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. You can go there, find out more information than I could possibly tell you here, and hopefully consider backing the project. Now, So Dead is a competitive game where you and the other players are the lone straggling survivors of an apocalypse. Although the apocalypse is still going on. Areas are being destroyed by this inexplicable force, whatever you want it to be, zombies or just horrible biblical plague, whatever the case might be. And so you're all these weirdos who are trying to fight against each other for the last scraps of resources that are left and be the king of the hill, the last person, king or queen of the hill, the last person left standing after all the dust settles. And that is easier said than done, of course. You need to get as many combat and protective items as you can, all of which adds up to become your combat value. You need to get special items that will help save you from killing blows from your opponents, should it come to that. And in the meantime, you've got this apocalypse destroying location after location after location. So, without further ado, let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played with a prototype copy of the game. So, as always, of course, what you see here may change in the final version, and that is exactly why you should go to the Kickstarter page to find out more information about what that final version is going to be like. But in any event, after that, we will come back and discuss it further. So Dead is a competitive game for 5 to 8 players. In a world that is slowly succumbing to the apocalypse, each player is a strange wanderer vying for domination of the wasteland. You'll explore different locations and loot the dead to acquire items that can harm your opponents or protect your character. If you're the last person left standing, you'll win the game. Set up the game by giving each player a character, randomly or by choice. Every character has a unique special ability they can use during the game, that is either always on or usable once per game. You'll also each get a die and 2 meeples of a matching color, along with a deck of 12 starting cards. Shuffle them and draw 5 as an opening hand. This is the basic gear you'll begin with, consisting of weapons, protective gear, and utility items, though you'll gain much better cards later. Lay out the hospital location card, and then shuffle 5 other random locations and lay them out in a ring on the table as shown. The hospital is considered location 1, and in clockwise order the other locations are numbered 2 through 6. Each location will tell you whether it's inside or outside, and also directions on how you move when a number is rolled on the dice. Shuffle the loot deck and place it in the middle of the locations, then put 6 random cards from the deck near each location as potential loot. Loot cards can be acquired by the players and added to their decks, and while they fall into the same categories as your starting cards, they're much better, with more combat power, protective capacity, or even more useful abilities. Each player will roll their die and place one of their meeples at whatever location comes up, from 1 to 6, starting with the hospital, as I mentioned before. Next, make a stock of level up tokens and victory tokens. Each level up token will give you +1 to your total combat value from then on, and victory markers are gained when defeating opponents and can act as tiebreakers in combat. Finally, randomly choose a start player and give them the stack of apocalypse tokens to denote this. During the game, apocalypse tokens will be placed to show destroyed locations. Each round of the game is broken down into phases, in which all players will mostly act at the same time. The first phase is moving. Roll your die and look at your location. Move either clockwise or counterclockwise according to your roll. If you roll a 6, you determine which direction to move, or if you want to stay put, and you get to decide after everyone else has already moved. After moving, you may have a chance to battle or loot. If you're alone at the new location, you may take any one card from the loot pile there and place it in your discard pile face down. However, if you are with one or more other players at the location, you'll have to fight. Each of these players will place 2 cards from their hand face down, and then everyone will reveal them simultaneously and compare total combat values. You can only count 1 weapon card and 1 armor card for this purpose, and their values are added together with any level up tokens you have or special modifiers from your character. Whoever ends up with the lowest value will be eliminated from the game unless they play a card that saves them, like the first aid kit. The highest player will get to loot the location as normal, but also gets up to 4 cards from any player who was knocked out of the game, and a victory token, again, only if a player was knocked out. Once every player has had a chance to loot and every combat is resolved, you move on to the third phase, which is checking to see if the apocalypse reaches a new location and destroys it. For the first turn of the game, the start player will roll a die and place an apocalypse token on whichever location comes up. That location is now uninhabitable, and any player currently there needs to immediately roll a die and move away. Also, that location's loot pile is removed from the game and placed underneath the loot deck. Then, proceed to the next phase. On subsequent turns, you'll need to check the locations to see if any of them are empty with no meeples or apocalypse tokens. If there is one or more empty locations, the apocalypse will spread. If not, you place an apocalypse token on the loot deck. If there's already one there, the apocalypse spreads. Spreading means that the player rolls a die and the apocalypse either spreads clockwise or counterclockwise from its current position. The first location in that direction that does not have a token now gets one. If any player's meeple is there, they must escape. They'll roll a die and move in the corresponding direction. But if the new location also has an apocalypse token, that player is destroyed and out of the game along with all of their loot. No one else gets it. The fourth phase of the game only happens if there are 3 or less players left. The apocalypse spreads until only one space is left. If only one player is left after this, the game ends in their victory. If everyone remaining dies because of this, there's a roll-off to see who, quote-unquote, wins. If, however, there are 2 or 3 players left on the final location, they engage in combat for the rest of the game until one player is left standing and wins the game. But barring all of that, on a normal turn, the round ends with the 5th phase. Players can level up by turning in supply cards. For every 2 supply points that you gain by turning in these supply cards, you can take 1 level up token. Afterwards, all players discard any remaining cards in hand and draw 5 new ones. If their decks are empty, they'll reshuffle their discard piles and keep drawing, which could lead them to draw new and better cards that they've already gained during the course of the game. Finally, every location that is still active gets 1 new loot card added to their loot piles, and a new round begins. Keep playing until one player remains and wins the game. That is So Dead.
While post-apocalyptic games and media in general that takes place after a worldwide catastrophe, while these are very common things, I think what sets So Dead apart, aside from the title, is the fact that it's got this very unique art style to it. Very high-quality art style, but one that is cute in some ways, but also unmistakably dark, lending to that theme of an apocalyptic wasteland. And the fact of the matter is, I should make it clear, the apocalypse is still going on. So some of the locations that you go to and the artwork that you see there still looks bright and vibrant, but at any given moment it's going to be obliterated. So the theme can be pretty dark, but the fact of the matter is this is a very light game, which is not to be mistaken for a necessarily overly simple game, but it's very easy to learn, very fast to set up, and easy to set up, and to teach people as well, and turns go very quickly. I should say rounds go very quickly, because everyone sort of, for the most part, acts simultaneously from phase to phase throughout a round. So you're just quickly doing things, moving, looting, fighting, and then potentially looting, or dying, and all of these things. And so it goes very quickly around and around, and you're never really bogged down that much. You're never like sitting there waiting for someone else's turn. You might have to wait for a combat, but that's it. Which is all to say that while the theme is very dark, it feels lighter than it is, and that's, I think, where the sort of cutesy artwork comes into play as well. So you're never too bogged down in misery for for an apocalyptic game. But I should also note, and I probably should have mentioned this back in the beginning as well, that this is essentially a deck building game too. Very light deck building game elements, but it is that. That is the core element, because you start off with very simple cards, but then you're going to get better ones that are significant upgrades. Like you might have a baseball bat in the beginning, but then you're going to upgrade to a shotgun, and that's all going to add to your combat value. So again, while you can upgrade, it all is very straightforward and it all works the same. You're just getting better cards. So how combat works in the beginning is how it's going to work at the end. You're not bogged down with a ton of tiny details that just keep getting introduced as the game draws on. And there is this impending sense of doom, and this is why the game does not overstay its welcome. It's not just like, okay, roll, fight, and see if someone dies every round. One way or the other, the game is going to come to an end because all these locations are getting destroyed one after another, and all of your avenues for escape and mobility and looting are all shutting down one by one. So you don't only have to worry about the other players and worry about ending up in a spot with them when you may not be equipped to handle them. You have to worry about being able to get to a free, empty location when the apocalypse tokens start piling up near you, which is a very interesting way to do that and to give you this sense of urgency. And again, lends back to the idea that you're not just sitting around and waiting. The game is very dynamic in that sense. But in the process of me saying all this, to be clear, again, very simple, fast, and straightforward. And but still other elements that make it interesting, like the idea of the level up tokens and the combat tokens to incentivize killing players as much as possible, and also to incentivize getting rid of the supply cards in your hand, things like that. So there's a surprising amount going on here for how light and casual that it is. And so in that regard, if you have light and casual players that you're trying to introduce deck building game elements to, or at least something that, again, this game plays 5 to 8 players. You can actually play it with 2 to 4 players by taking multiple characters, or you can play it with theoretically up to like 24 players if you have more copies of the game. And so it actually almost feels like a party game in that sense, but if you want to have casual players play a party game that has more strategy to it than your average, like, just simple, funny word card game, then this might be up your alley. And you don't have to take my word for that. You can go to the official Kickstarter project page and find out more information. Follow the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. That is So Dead from Lone Knight Games. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, for supporting our sponsors. Take care.